Genesis 12, verses 1 through 9. Al frente del libro. In the front of the book. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took his wife Sarai and his brother's son Lot, and all the possessions that they had garnered, and the persons whom they had acquired in Haran. And they set forth to go to the land of Canaan. When they had come to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he moved on to the hill country of the east of Bethel and pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and invoked the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on by stages towards the Negeb.
When Mary Lou invited me to be with you in this capacity this morning, I asked her what the scripture reading was, and she said, "You can choose whatever you want," which makes me feel terribly uncomfortable. So instead of doing that, I've simply used the Old Testament passage and the New Testament passage that are appointed in the Revised Common Lectionary for today. I know that Trinity isn't following the Revised Common Lectionary currently. We've been using the narrative lectionary, and in the season of Pentecost, there's a great deal of freedom. But the readings for today, both the Genesis reading that JB just read and this reading from Matthew, are the readings appointed by the Revised Common Lectionary. So, hear now the word of the Lord. This is from Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 through 13 and 18 through 26. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died. But come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made whole. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout that district. This is the word of the Lord. There's a lot of getting up and going in these two stories. Abram gets up and goes from his country and his father's house. Matthew gets up and goes from his job and his life. Matthew and Jesus together get up in the middle of dinner and go to the leader of the synagogue's house. A lot of getting up and going. In fact, that's the most common event in the Bible. People get up and go. While I was trying to listen to these stories in preparation for this service, I came across an article about the recent migration of college-educated professionals away from the great urban meccas like New York and San Francisco to places like Harrisonburg. And I thought about how dramatically that getting up and going differs from what happens in these stories. I also thought about the many times that I've gotten up and gone myself. And I wondered how my getting up and going relates to what Abram does in that passage from Genesis, or what Matthew does in the gospel reading for today. And of course, inevitably, I thought about my primary preoccupation these days, which is the degree to which people like me, or more importantly, people like my children, have gotten up and gone away from this house. Most of the pews in most of the churches of the Shenandoah Presbytery are empty this morning, and next week they'll be emptier still, and the week after that. Like a lot of clergy people, the Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers of the Episcopal Church believes that Christianity is undergoing one of its periodic reconfigurations. Every 400 or 500 years, the church has to throw off the junk that the world has piled on top of it. The church is being forced to reckon with the consequences of its self-centrism, its allegiance to systems of domination, and its capitulation to imperial power, forced by the departure of people like my children from this house, by the millions, an entire generation. What are we to do? I have to be careful around terms like imperial power and systems of domination, in part because I came of age among men who had set their feet against the system of domination that wanted them to get up and go to Vietnam and kill the people who lived there. Those men left this house because it didn't try to stop America from imposing its perspective and economy upon the world. And they were right to get up and go. Christianity's acquiescence to that imposing posture is one of the reasons half the churches in the Shenandoah Presbytery will be dead in 20 years. I started to become the person I recognize as myself around men whose lives were threatened by imperial power and systems of domination. And my emotional reaction to those terms today is an echo of theirs. Those terms make me want to jump around and wave my arms and shake my fists, even though I'm not sure what they mean. Not like those men were sure, because I wasn't old enough to go to Vietnam. That's why I have to be careful with these words, because the lords of empire like nothing better than to see a bunch of Christians wave their arms and shake their fists over words that can't be pinned to anything specific. Stephanie Spellers offers us a more specific way to think about those terms, what they mean in our lives and in our culture and in the stories we just read. Americans are shaped by the assertion of our rights, Spellers suggests, especially our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We Americans are encouraged to organize our lives around our individual desires. The American story consists in people protecting themselves and what's theirs and what makes them happy with a gun or a flag or an emblem or an ideology or a political party or a church. That's who we are. That's how we came to be who we are. Well, the problem with that posture for American Christians is that the story of Jesus imposes exactly the opposite posture on people who would follow him. Jesus invites us into a covenant, Spellers suggests, where by the power of the Holy Spirit, we can choose to let our hearts break. Choose to let our hearts break. And then take all those broken pieces of our goods, our privileges, the things we love, the lives we've made for ourselves, and pass them around like pieces of bread. That's not the American way of life. You may notice that Spellers has dropped us into the middle of another language problem, the intersection of figurative language, allowing our hearts to break, and literal speech, passing around the things we love and the lives we've made for ourselves. What does let our hearts break mean? And how can doing that affect imperial power? Those are the questions under which we should turn to the gospel. The gospel story for today is conspicuous for miracles, but it begins with a call. Matthew gets up, showers, drives to work, and gets ready for his first appointment, the first of 10 or 20. He decides to believe that his first appointment wants to fulfill her civic responsibility by paying her taxes. And he wants to help her do that, help this woman make her contribution to the whole. He feels a measure of satisfaction in his own role as a person with the skills to help her do that, a set of skills he's built through study and practice over many years. Not because that's the role he always wanted to play, but because that's his life, the one into which he was born, the one he has decided to make the most of. He helps his first appointment create a payment structure that accounts for her husband's leukemia and the family's diminished income without depriving them of the chance to do their part, to be contributors. Then he's called into a meeting with the corporate division where he's asked for advice on exactly what might be said to a Samaritan merchant who appears to be smuggling frankincense and myrrh. And from there he goes out to the booth in the plaza where delinquent, self-destructive, or self-loathing people can take that first step toward becoming givers again, by dropping their farthings into a purse that they trust under the gaze of a man who knows they have failed and honors them anyway. There's Matthew in the middle of a pretty good day when Jesus walks up to the booth and says, "Follow me." As I'm telling this story, it's important to remind myself that Matthew is not me. I've filled him out with details that resemble mine in some ways because I want to see him as a person who's doing the best he can with the life that he has. And I want to see myself that way as well. But Matthew isn't me in a couple of important ways. First, in what he does not do. When I was young, I yearned to leave home, and I did so as soon as I could. I left to get away from grief and shame and fear, especially the fear that my future would be controlled by all that was wrong inside of me, unless I got away from the place where all that wrongness was running over the parts of myself that I liked. I might have said that I wanted to break away from the shapes that seemed to be delimiting my life. I might have said that I wanted to step off the customary path to show that custom is an idol. I might have said that I wanted to avoid winding up like my parents who were unhappy. I could have simply said that I was an American. Matthew surely had his share of grief and shame and fear. He was surely aware of wrongness in himself, and he surely would have liked to get away from it. Surely Matthew knew that custom was an idol that could cut him off from God, that his life was limited by shapes and lines he did not draw, and that he would wind up like his parents, whether they were happy or not. But Matthew isn't an American. His thoughts about the world and himself are not controlled by the culture of self-determination, where everybody has the right to seek fulfillment. So he doesn't leave his home to get away from grief and shame and fear. He stays and lives with them and learns from them and makes the most of a life that includes them. So first that, what Matthew doesn't do. And then what he does. He chucks it all, his only life. He puts his badge on the desk and his keys in the drawer, and he walks away from everything he's ever known or been to follow Jesus. That's not the way I get up and go. Some years ago, when I was in seminary, I learned that the words spoken to Abram by God at the beginning of that Genesis passage that J.B. read, the words that we hear as, go from your father's house and from your country, in Hebrew are lech lecha, and that they can be interpreted or translated as, get up and go toward yourself. And I seized on that interpretation because that's how I get up and go. Matthew doesn't go that way. Following Jesus is not the next step in Matthew's program of spiritual growth or the next phase of the life he's been building for years. Following Jesus cuts the disciple off completely from his previous experience, Dietrich Bonhoeffer says. The disciple must burn his boat, Bonhoeffer argues, and plunge into absolute insecurity in order to learn the demand and the gift of Christ. If we imagine we can follow Jesus without taking that step into absolute insecurity, we delude ourselves. I don't think that's going to work for me. I'm too old. I've given too much of my life and my heart to finding value in the way I live. I've spent too much energy and too much spirit learning not to break away from the shapes that delimit my life, building a skill, trying to make a contribution. Part of me would love to be like Matthew. Take off my badge, put down my keys, and walk away, because staying is hard. But the truth is that the person I resemble in this story is the guy at the end who hears Jesus say that the girl isn't dead, she's only sleeping, and he laughs. That's me. Or that's the presence of empire in me. The call to worship we recited in Spanish and English is Isaiah chapter 55, the loveliest vision of the holy world in all of Scripture. I want to believe that life can be what Isaiah describes. I want to believe that if I touch the shirt of Christ, the sickness will go out of me. I want to believe that the dead girl will get up when Christ touches her hand. The degree to which empire has infiltrated American Christians like me is measured by my willingness to say that, yeah, it's true, the world should be that way. People should be able to come and eat and drink the best of everything without any money. We should allow our hearts to break and then pass the broken pieces of the things we love and the lives we've made around to everyone. We should. That's how the vision of Isaiah 55 comes true. But the real world doesn't work that way. Yes, the sickness should go out of me when I touch Jesus' shirt. The dead girl should get up and walk across the room when Jesus takes her hand. But she's still dead. Recite that beautiful poem all you like in whatever language lifts your soul, because that's what religion is for. Religion is supposed to lift your soul. Just don't confuse the way the world should be with how it is. Imperial power in my life and in American Christianity is the force that tells me to admire the ideal, that glorious Isaiah vision, while accepting its absence from the actual world. Better to be one of the laughers, imperial power tells me, than the one they're laughing at. Rejecting imperial power doesn't mean that we should live in the world as if it were not what it is. For people like you and me, rejecting or living in the world as if it were not what it is a system of domination. Just ignore what's wrong with the world, because we can. We're Americans. Rejecting imperial power means that we have to let our hearts be broken by what the world actually is. The gulf between the world we live in and Isaiah 55 should break our hearts. My capacity to gaze upon that gulf and to respond to that gulf with a kind of constant low-grade disillusion so that the gulf does not break my heart, that is the victory of imperial power over Christ. Most of us aren't Matthew. Most of us can't get up and go the way he did. But there's another way to throw off the junk the world has piled on the Christian church and on the Christ in ourselves. It begins with figuring out what constitutes my heart, that collection of hopes, ideas, and perspectives made precious to me by my long investment in them. Finding all those thoughts and things that tell me who I am and deciding it's okay to let them go. And then loosening my grip. Not in acquiescence to low-grade disillusion, not in the spirit of accepting a diminished self, but so that Christ can take the place of all those precious things. Let those things be passed around the circle, shared with everyone, like bread. Letting go of those things will change me and the church into something I can't foresee, something that I might not recognize, something that might look more like Christ. That's what it means to get up and go toward yourself. Amen.